am Dena, and you are tuned into a discussion with Dena. Just a reminder, once again, that there are three independent and third party candidates who are currently running for president in 2024: Cornel West, Jill Stein, and Chase Oliver. That is, in addition to the Republican and Democratic candidates. I am convinced, and many others may be, that this current two party system is just not effective. It appears to be very corrupt, nonchalant to the needs of its own citizens, and pretty much ran by big corporations with big money and think tanks with big agendas. Agendas that I find questionable, unnecessary, and simply are just not in agreement with family values, are beneficial for that matter to the future success of this country. In fact, some may even find it to be disastrous for the country. So we find ourselves dealing with some very detrimental issues that have been made more challenging by the current administration, leaving many Democrats in particular exploring better options, or perhaps even considering choosing the couch. The current administration's lack of ability to prevent and utilize resources to control illegal entry into the country has led to adversity in many communities. Not to mention, we are dealing with the highest inflation I have ever witnessed in my life. The price for goods increases daily. And I want to see reparations on the ballots. It is being purposely blocked and gridlocked by Democrats, the very Democrats that were voted in to work on our behalf. And not to mention depriving citizens, legal taxpayers of resources and benefits, instead funneling millions of taxpayer dollars to give an advantage to illegals who have entered the country. Millions who have chosen to ignore the laws that have been put in place regarding entry into this particular country. They simply bypass those laws and are now being rewarded with benefits. Benefits that are financed by your dollars and mine. We are being denied many of those same resources that are given to them. And it has created a huge problem, one that the Democrats seem to ignore, a problem that was seemingly exacerbated by the current administration. The same administration that ignores the outcry from actual citizens of this country who are being greatly affected by the allowances of illegals to take their much needed resources away. So people are seeking better alternatives to what we have become accustomed to. Plain and simple, the Democrats as well as the Republicans leave much to be desired in this current political arena. So today we want to highlight another independent candidate that is running for president, Mr. Chase Oliver.
Well, I'm running because I do believe that America deserves more than two options on the ballot of lower and lower expectations, and I do believe that I can be the best messenger for the Libertarian Party philosophy. That's why I jumped in the race for my party's nomination, and now that I've earned it, I'm going around the country to let voters know that they don't have to settle for just the Democrats or Republicans in this country. And if people ask who I am, I'm a 39-year-old regular American who's had to work paycheck to paycheck throughout my life. I worked 13 years in the restaurant industry, starting out as a dishwasher. I left that industry as someone who helps new entrepreneurs start restaurants. I did 5 years working in the maritime logistics industry, helping to move goods from one side of the world to your store shelves all over America. So I'm somebody who recognizes the power of free markets, but also who recognizes the struggles of living the everyday American life, because I'm not somebody who was born into political privilege. I wasn't born a billionaire, and I wasn't somebody who's been active in government for the last 50 years. And so I'm somebody who's much more connected to the life of the average American than those others who are running for the highest office in the land. And I hope voters can see their values reflected in a regular, American like myself. The electorate is really just sick and tired of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and that's what we've been given from the two-party system as a repeat of 2020. And voters want something fresh, they want something new, and they want something bold. And that is the message of liberty, the message that if you're living your life in peace, you're not harming anybody else, your life's your life, your body's your body, your business is your business, and your property is your property. It's not mine and it's not the government's, and I think that's something a lot of voters can find refreshing. Well, the first thing you're going to know is that if I enter the office of the presidency, the office of president will be a weaker office when I leave than when I take office, and that's because so much of what the president has done over my lifetime is a result of the legislature just kind of falling asleep at the wheel and giving so much executive overreach to the president. And so mine would be one that exercises the presidency within constitutional bounds, but also seeks to do things like balancing our budget at least, if we can't get it lower than that, and really making drastic changes to our priorities both at home and abroad in a way that respects the Constitution and the individual rights and civil liberties of all. Well, I think it's time that we stop trying to export our values via militarism, via the bomb and the bullet. I'm somebody who believes in free markets, free trade, and voluntary exchange. I think that's a better way to forge relationships with our international neighbors. You know, if I'm buying something from you or selling something to you, there's a good reason for us not to want to shoot at each other and bomb each other. And so I think forging market relationships, tearing down protectionism that we've seen both from Donald Trump and then now recently doubled and tripled down on with these tariffs from Joe Biden, I think that we can tear down these barriers and actually start to export our values via diplomacy and trade instead of bombing people around the world, which is what we've done my entire adult life. I don't want to fight a culture war. I believe in a free cultural exchange of ideas. I say this as an LGBT Christian, right, who kind of gets on both sides of the cultural aisle, right, in terms of things. But really, as long as people are living in peace, they should be able to, in instance. You know, libertarians ideally believe that the government shouldn't be involved in marriage at all. That should be a personal contract between two people. But so long as until that ends, we believe that anybody should have access to it. But if your church doesn't want to marry somebody, that's their right, it's their property, it's their faith. I don't want to go get married in a church that doesn't want me to get married there. I don't want to give them their money. I'd rather pay to rent the hall and to have somebody who wants to marry me who's excited to marry me, right? I think that's the kind of thing liberty affords, is that you can be as conservative or as liberal as you want. Just don't seek to use the power of government, the levers of power, to foist that upon somebody who might be different than you. I became a member, the first time I was introduced to the Libertarian Party, I was a disaffected Obama voter in 2010, being part of the anti-war movement. And I happened to wander upon the Libertarian Party of Georgia. They were out there at the Atlanta Pride Festival with their candidates. Their candidate for governor literally waved me into the tent and helped me connect my anti-war views with a kind of the greater philosophy of liberty. And my journey that started there, and I was a full-fledged party member by 2014. I got to vote for Gary Johnson in 2012 as my first vote for a libertarian candidate for president. But really, it's been a journey from 2010 to about 2014. Now I'm a hardcore libertarian running for president.
Here are his thoughts on immigration.
Immigration policy is a 21st century Ellis Island. The reason being, because that was the last time we had the great migration wave into this country. 1 in 4 Americans can trace their heritage back to Ellis Island. And so I want to bring that back to the minds of Americans when they think about immigration today. What we need to do is practice what Ellis Island did, but in the 21st century. So come through a port of entry, declare who you are, get a quick background check, and then come in this country with legal status to work if you're a migrant worker. This does several things. One, it prevents wages from being driven down from American workers, because the reason why immigrant labor drives down, not just because of market practices, but because they're exploited for their wages. They have to accept less payment for fear of deportation. Now you'll have workers competing on a level playing field. 2, this is safer for our communities, because right now, if you're an immigrant, and you see a crime occurring, you might not want to go to the police and report that for fear of putting your name on an official document and having that traced back to you and eventually being found to be here without documentation or legal status. And 3, it actually allows our law enforcement to laser focus on the real crimes going on our southern border. Things like human trafficking for the purposes of labor or sexual exploitation, or for people who fraud people by taking fentanyl and pressing them to look like Xanax pills. That's fraud. I'm a libertarian. I want to legalize all drugs, but to fraud somebody and cause overdoses is a real crime as well. The market can determine exactly how many jobs we need to have, the labor pool we need to have. And I think we as libertarians who have always supported the free market need to recognize that labor is also a marketplace, and there is a supply and demand, and that will work itself out accordingly. Another great thing about the Ellis Island model is you can come here for seasonal employment. If you're an agricultural worker, for instance, you can come here during planting and harvesting, and then once the harvesting season is over, you take your money back south of the border to see your family again, and where your money is going to go much further. My case against Harris personally is just much of a record, both as a DA in San Francisco, her time as AG in California, and her just very lackluster time as a senator before becoming vice president. If you look at her time as DA in San Francisco, she put a lot of good people in jail for the crime of consuming cannabis, while she even admitted on the Breakfast Club that she was a user of cannabis. She laughed about wanting to jail truant or parents of truant students, as if jailing the parents of kids who are skipping school is going to make their education outcomes better. She was just generally uncaring when it came to being the AG and keeping people in prison past their sentences so they could maintain volunteer firefighters with the prison firefighters. There's evidence that she kept evidence passed that would have kept people out of jail. Like, there's a lot of scummy things she's done in her record that just make her as not fitting to be president. And then just generally, the Democratic Party is a party that is a big spending party, that every problem they have, there needs to be a government solution. I think they exacerbate a lot of the social issues that we're seeing in a way that's not productive. For the Hyde Amendment, I don't think taxpayer money should be going to fund abortion, because I do think it's a very moral gray area for many people. It's an area where there's a lot of individual decision making needs to be happening, and I don't want to take people's taxpayer money to fund abortion if they're, ardently pro-life.
Here is what Mr. Oliver had to say in regards to foreign policy.
My preferred foreign policy is one that we are exporting our values via voluntary trade and exchange and not using militarism. And so I would seek to basically close overseas bases, remove our military footprint, and bring our military back in line with its true mission, which would be defending ourselves from invasion, not exporting and going into war all over the world. We can have allies that we shouldn't be entangled into supporting them, but we can broadly have market relationships and allyships and friendships with nations all over the world. But we should not be contingent of, if you are attacked, we must defend, because there can be situations where, contingencies where that shouldn't be the case. I prefer to keep ourselves free from foreign entanglements, as our first president kind of highlighted the need to do. But that doesn't mean that we can't rise to the need of our friends, just like we did in World War II. When we were attacked, we immediately joined in the fight. We allied with nations that were on our side of the conflict. The policy of funding the fight against Ukraine, I think, frankly, right now we've already sent hundreds of billions at this point, but I think Europe, mainland Europe, should be leading that fight if they're going to militarily engage. They're the ones who are most directly threatened. If I were president, my policy would be allowing refugees to come to the United States who are in the middle of the firefight, so that way we can get innocent people out of the war zone, as well as providing amnesty for any person who's conscripted to fight in a war they don't want to fight in, which is what most of the Russian military is at this point. Let these people go AWOL, because conscription is slavery. You shouldn't be forced to fight in a war. And I can think of no better use of amnesty than allowing those who've been politically forced to fight in a war to no longer have to do so. I think when you look at the definitions that are brought forward by the International Criminal Court, I think much of the standards there have been met by the practices of the Israeli government. And I think that's to the detriment of the Israeli people, who would like to see a more peaceful and stable Israel, who would like to see a more peaceful and stable region. And so, yes, I think what we have seen from Netanyahu and his government and his war cabinet can rise to that occasion. So for me, yes, people of Israel have a right to exist. Everyone has a right to exist, frankly, whether you're under one nation or another. But the people of Israel have a right to exist, but so do the people of Palestine. And whether that's existing under one state or two, they need to figure out, not the United States, but we do need to be planning to withdraw ourselves completely from the Middle East. I think the best thing we can do is be a neutral arbiter. If someone wants a place, a neutral playing ground, a Camp David or something like that to speak at and to summit at, we can act as that neutral person. But what we should not be doing is putting our thumb on the scale. And I think that's what we've been doing over the last few decades. And it's not led to better outcomes. In fact, it's led to more turmoil and more tension in the region. And so we need to take ourselves off. We need to take ourselves off of adding pressure to that situation and insisting that the governments and the people that they are supposed to be representing, really, frankly, the people need to be rising up and demanding peace and insisting that their governments act in accordance with the will of their people. I am not certain of
Chase Oliver's stance on reparations that are owed to black descendants of slaves in America. There is no information present time that shows him articulating his view on this very vital issue. Just a reminder, presenting this information by no means should be interpreted as an endorsement or support for this candidate or any other candidate or group. It is simply acknowledging that the presidential options are larger than just the Republican and Democratic parties. Jill Stein's campaign info, Cornel West, Chase Oliver's platform as well. If you would like more information, policies, and campaign, you can visit his website. Be sure to subscribe and leave me your comments. And join me next time for another discussion with Dena. Ta-ta!
This concludes your daily discussions with Dena. Join us Monday through Friday at 12:30 p.m. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.